and welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and my guest today is returning for, I believe, like the third time, and I'm really glad that he's joining us again, Reverend Paul Nugent. He is with the Aetherius Society, and we are going to talk about some interesting topics. And Paul, I want to welcome you back to our program. It's great. It's always great to have you on the program. We have great conversation.
Yeah, we do indeed. Thank you very much, Richard. I always look forward to it.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about, specifically, we're going to talk about three different topics, but it could go just about anywhere, as you know, Paul. You are also a reverend. Under what, shall we say, under what banner shall we put that reverendship under?
Well, you can put it under the banner of the Aetherius Church. We are a church. We've been incorporated here in the state of California since 1960. In fact, we just commemorated a few days ago on November the 22nd our 61st anniversary.
Wow!
And I was ordained into the Aetherius churches in 1992, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time. I have been a reverend for about 10 years, 11, I guess, this year, only because I was reminded by the Universal Life Church online that congratulations, you're celebrating your 10th anniversary. I'm going, oh yeah, I remember signing up for that, and I found the certificate on my wall the other day. I'm going, how could I forget? It's right there.
Well, good for them and good for you.
Well, I figured, with considering myself a metaphysician in that respect, it can't hurt. So I go by Reverend Dr. D. The Dr. D was given to me some years ago by people, and I kind of use that as my moniker for being an audio physician. I do archival work as well. And I like the Reverend part because I'm not going to say that it gives me any kind of legitimacy necessarily, although I'm sure you have been studying for many, many years the ancient wisdom teachings, as well as the teachings of what is now the Aetherius Society. I'm curious as to, and then we're going to get into our subjects here. I'm curious as to that particular path in your life and how you have, how your view of not only the outer world, but even your inner world has changed over the decades.
Well, inevitably, I think, for anybody who is sort of paying attention and is engaged in life, there's a wonderful saying, everything changes and why pretend otherwise? And, that's the nature of our being here. I think everything does change. And it's a matter of molding and adapting oneself, not to be held up by those changes, but to continuously learn and to grow. And that's been my journey. Much like yours, I'm certain, and like hopefully most people who are making the most. I mean, I think, we're going to get into sort of reincarnation later on.
Mm-hmm.
And it is this, in a sense, endless, timeless journey that we're all on. But being here is incredibly important and incredibly precious. It's our opportunity to learn and to grow, and not to waste in what, at the end of the day, are perhaps frivolous things. But anyway, we'll leave that for later, Richard.
Well, I will tell you that the three topics that we are going to discuss on this particular program. We can talk about them individually, but in a manner of speaking, they are inseparable. They're like the 3 points on a triangle, if you will.
I fully concur with that.
Yeah.
I'm very glad you said that.
Yeah.
I would have otherwise had to say it myself.
You can't have one without the other two.
You can't.
And I'm going to start with what I think we talked about a little bit. We alluded to it in our last program. And by the way, folks, if you missed our last two programs. He's been on twice. This is his third visit to Tell Me Your Story. You need to go to SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher. You can also go to YouTube where you can watch these interviews as well and just look up Reverend Paul Nugent and the Aetherius Society. They're there. You can find them, not a problem. Just go to the Tell Me Your Story channel on YouTube. Just make sure you go to the right one. It's the one with the guy with the black hat. There is another one there, but it's nothing like this program, I guarantee you. I want to start with the discussion of the juxtaposition between, and it's real interesting, between free will and predestiny, if you will. And I think about this from this context. On the one hand, we are told that we have free will, that all of the choices that we make are independent of everybody else or anything else, that our minds decide what it is. We create these choices that we make. And of course, we talk about that on this program, about giving people choices and knowledge of those choices. Then there's the other aspect of it where I talk about Judgment Day, for example, and standing before God, if you believe in that particular aspect of the philosophy of Christianity. And I say, okay, on the one hand, God, I have 2 points. Okay, number one is, there is nothing I can say at this point that's going to change your mind or the rules. So you're going to send me wherever I go. So there's really nothing more for me to say. But point 2 is, I did the very best with the life that I was given. And if that is not good enough, once again, it's already been predetermined because you're omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. You knew, and actually you set all of this up before the beginning of time. And again, this is based upon the philosophy. And so really, I was just a pawn. I was just a puppet. And I often use the analogy of someone who says, I just want to do God's will, and they're holding it in their hands, and they toss it in the air, and God catches it, crushes it down into the size of a baseball, and hurls it back and hits that person in the forehead and says to that person, then do something with the life I gave you. You are not a puppet on a string, being manipulated by forces you do not understand. So you've got these two almost diametrically opposed concepts. You can't have predestination and free will, can you?
Well, the word you used earlier on there, Richard, was juxtaposition. And I think that is the word. And I think that it is a conundrum. It's very similar to the conundrum, which came first, the chicken or the egg. And there are various things that, there are 3 things in particular that are sort of wanting to come out of my head anyway at this point. One is one of my favorite lines from Shakespeare. Unfortunately, I tend to quote Shakespeare a lot. I apologize for that.
No worries. He's got some great stuff.
He does. And one of them, which is from the play Hamlet, is there's a divinity which shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will. In other words, wherever we go, whatever we do in life, for better or for worse, there's this overriding force, which he uses the word divinity. I think it's the correct word to use, this greater karmic force, the will of God, whatever it is, so however we live our lives, there's this overriding force that's always shaping us, moving us forward, or attempting to. And when we go in the wrong direction, it will be there to move us back. And when we're going in the right direction, to help move us forward. I think that is what is taking place. There's another thing that I want to say is that there is a growing number of philosophers and thinkers of all kinds, I suppose, who do actually maintain that, yes, we're just acting out what has already been preset. And you can't sort of blame anybody because they were destined to do it. And you can't thank or appreciate anybody because they were destined to do it. Everything, this conversation, what I'm saying now, what is already set. It's like watching what's already happened just in reverse motion.
Mm-hmm.
And initially when I came across this philosophy, I kind of laughed at it and perhaps was too easily dismissed it. But of late, I've sort of started to appreciate the potential truth in it, but I still do not 100% adhere to it.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing I want to say, tying this in with the Aetherius Society, I suppose, which of course was founded by yoga master Dr. George King, who we've discussed in our two previous programs. I had the fortune to take care of Dr. George King in the latter years of his life, actually in Santa Barbara, where you are based.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one particular day he was sitting in the living room, and I passed through the living room into the kitchen, and I obviously was moving for his liking too fast, too quickly. So he came into the kitchen, and bear in mind he was an elderly man at this point, and he said, "Why are you rushing? There's no rush. There's only God's time, which is now, and it's all happened anyway." And it was just this very striking and remarkable statement which he's made. It's all happened anyway, which in a way you could say certainly ties into the argument of the growing number of philosophers, so I understand, excuse me, adhere to, that we are just acting out what's already happened. However, I don't buy into that, and I don't excuse me, I've got to clear my throat. I don't think Dr. King meant that either, not in its entirety. I think that there are certain inevitabilities based upon our karmic pattern that we will inevitably, in one form or another, encounter. In that sense, nothing by chance. But I think that much of the smaller stuff, the sort of day-to-day incidental stuff, is not to an entire extent, but to a large extent, free will, an action of free will in the moment. But we're to that extent, we are products of our own thinking, and which comes out of our past and out of what's already been predestined. So it really is this incredible conundrum that.
Well, there's an interesting element to throw in there in terms of the choices we've made in the past have brought us to where we are. And of course, they say the choices that we make from this point forward will determine where we will be in the future. Right. And I loved what another one of my guests said. I quote this all the time. Throw this third element in there. The choices that you make today are based solely upon your perception of what you think the future will be. And I thought, wow.
Very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and immediately what comes to mind are two different types of individuals. One who has little or no fear of the future. They're very optimistic. I'd like to consider myself that person. I feel very optimistic about the future, regardless of how it may turn out. We may get hit by an asteroid and we're done. It's over. It's no big deal. It's the way it goes, in the universe. Then there are others who are fearful of the future. They're afraid of the quote unquote impending chaos and all of this and shortages and on and on. And they're what they call preppers, and they've got these holes in the ground that they've created that they and their family members and so forth can live in for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year or more, that kind of thing. And so their life revolves around making choices in preparation for the apocalypse, Armageddon. And I just think, man, I would rather be living my life and doing the things that I'm doing than staying focused on something like that. I mean, I want to change the world. I don't know about you, Paul, but I want to change the world. Now, it's
Well,
only going to be one interview at a time, but that's kind of where I'm at.
well, I'm certainly with you in terms of your ultimate optimism, and perhaps that sort of ties into what we've been trying to say of predestination and free will, because I think that it is predestined that this world will become what we might term the utopia, the heaven, whatever. I think that yes, and we're very much in the process of birthing this new world of humanity, this natural evolutionary process of evolving consciousness, and everything that flows from that. So I think that you could make a case. So that new world is predetermined. That is set in the heavens with God's ink, if you like. How we get there and the process, it comes down to our collective free will, the choices that as you were saying, that we each make. And that they are, I would agree, very largely framed by our vision of either being pessimistic and fearful, or being bold and optimistic and hopeful and positive. And so there I can see how these two things tie together, and I'd say that that's on a macro scale, you could say.
Yeah.
On the individual scale, I think to really bring this down, I think take my brother, who you don't know. But I think my brother intuitively, instinctively always knew that he would get married and have a big house and have lots of children, and it was pre-known for the guy. I remember myself years and years and years ago, as a child, probably at aged about 6, and I used to get picked up by this other lady with her children, who drove them to school. We went to the same school, so she would pick me up and drive me there. And the youngest of the children, who wasn't yet going to the school, was a chap called Tom. He was probably no more than 2 or 3 maybe. And we stopped, and there was a man who also got in the car, and he had very thick glasses. And Tom started to cry. And his mother said he always cries when he sees people wearing glasses. Well, I didn't see Tom for many years later. I mean, I did at the time, but then gap of 10 or more years. Tom was about 16. Tom is wearing very thick glasses. And I remember the story that his mother had said to how Tom, I think that he intuitively, instinctively knew from a very young age that he would wear glasses. And I can say the same in my own life. I was at the boarding school, and I remember the instant. It was in the library, and I was probably no more than 10 or 11 myself. And I just sort of, it was, I guess you could call it a sort of deja vu moment, which perhaps ties into some of this.
Yeah.
But at that young age, I knew that my life would be spent in some kind of community. And I've been with the Aetherius Society, which is very much in a sort of ashram kind of sense. I knew that it would pan out that way. So these are probably past life things that we pick up as intuition that really we cannot alter.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah. You're listening to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, and we're talking with Reverend Paul Nugent of the Aetherius Society on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you folks for being with us. I thank Paul for being with us as well, Reverend Paul Nugent, and the Aetherius Society. Before we move on to our next subject, again, these are tied together, these 3 subjects. They are not, you can't have one without the other 2. But I want to ask you to give our listeners who may be joining us for the first time, haven't listened to the other two interviews yet, what is the Aetherius Society, and what does Aetherius mean? Where does that come from as far as the society itself?
The Aetherius Society. Well, the Aetherius Society, which completely ties into this conversation, at least the sort of reincarnation aspect, you could say, and you can't have reincarnation without karma, and you can't have free will and predestination without those things. The Aetherius Society was founded in 1955 in England by Western master of yoga, Dr. George King, who'd spent the previous 10 years practicing various forms of yoga, advanced forms of yoga, as well as the pranayama, breathing exercises, and mantra yoga, for up to 8 hours a day over a 10-year period. He wasn't sort of dabbling in yoga. He was hitting it, extremely hard. 8 hours a day. This man was fully focused, fully disciplined, but determined, because he wanted the goal of yoga. Yoga, as you may know, being a Sanskrit word which means union with everything, union with God. And in that time period, and we're talking, as I said, 50s, like coming out of the Second World War, this was very topical in recent months anyway, time of tremendous flying saucer activity. And anyway, in 1954, he was contacted by an alien intelligence, we believe from the planet Venus. We're talking about other dimensions here, which certainly ties into reincarnation. Where do we go? Higher dimensions of frequency around this world and around the other planets. And in 1954, he was contacted by an intelligence going by the name of Aetherius, and later, well, over the following many years, Dr. King would go into what we call a positive yogic samadhic trance, samadhi, highest state of consciousness known to man, and be used as a medium for beings, not a lot of them, but a few, who communicated through him over the remainder of his life. He passed on in 1997, and these were all recorded. There were over 600 of these. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. You can't just, oh yeah, that guy, yeah, he took all these transmissions. Oh yeah, cool. You've got to actually listen to it. You've got to pay attention to it. You've got to put it between your teeth. You've got to bite it. You've got to analyze it. And for myself and for those of us in the Aetherius Society, had the hallmark of, not only the hallmark of truth, but the hallmark of extremely inspirational wisdom. I would say the exact kind of wisdom that our whole world needs. It needs this bigger vision. It needs to understand these metaphysical laws of karma, reincarnation, why we're here, where we go beyond death, where we go beyond this earth. This gives to humanity an utterly different perspective. And I think in terms of the birthing of a new world, which I mentioned earlier, but this will be how it is understood. It's not, we've got this incredibly limited, restricting philosophy on Earth that you could say, I would certainly say, is no longer working. And we need literally a bigger vision and a bigger understanding. So the Aetherius Society, yes, we bring in beings. We refer to them as cosmic masters. They are masters, and yes, they're cosmic in that sense. Who communicated through Dr. King, gave, as I say, profound spiritual wisdom and understanding, and the Aetherius Society has grown up around that.
We have been talking here with Reverend Paul Nugent of the Aetherius Society here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you for being with us. So our first subject, of course, had to do with the first point on the triangle, was predestination versus free will. And just to summarize very quickly, and it's actually easy to do, On the macro level, we are talking about an aspect of predestination, that the inevitable outcome is already set in place. But when you bring it down to our level, as you mentioned, Reverend Paul, it's the little things, it's the details that we can choose to say, so to speak, get on board or not. And yet at the same time, I have to wonder if, even if we don't get on board, if maybe that isn't a part of the overall big picture, the big plan. And it's kind of what we do with this program. We don't know what the big picture is, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to glean glimpses and little bits and pieces, other little images, like a puzzle, like a million piece puzzle that we're trying to put together. And you, Reverend Paul Nugent, you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 pieces, and we're going to take those and we're going to try to fit them into our perspective on the big picture. And little by little, we start putting it together and understanding. Well, one of the other aspects we want to talk about that is tied into this aspect of free will versus predestination is karma. That's a big subject, and there's a wonderful little 4-word phrase that people love to use when they see people doing stuff. For better or worse, there are actually 2 phrases. One of them is no good deed ever goes unpunished, and the other one is karma's a bitch, as they say. The reality is that it's actually borne out in science, even in physics. Einstein, he said it, and it's very clear. It doesn't always happen in the speed of light, but it does happen, and that is, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And to me, that describes karma on a scientific level to a T, that nobody escapes the good deeds or the bad deeds. The universe just has a way, as I that's how I view it, has a way of exchange. There is always an exchange. And when you're putting out, for example, negative energy, and I will be honest with you, I have to bring this up. I don't want to be political per se, but on June 15th of 2015, when the to-be president came down that escalator and he started his diatribe in front of the media, first of all, I said, I don't want to bully as a president. That was my first thought. But as he went on over the months, I said, this man is going to reap a whirlwind. You talk about karma being a bitch. Well, now he's no longer in office, and he is. He is, his colleagues, if you want to call them that, they're all getting in all kinds of trouble, and he may be next on the chopping block. And that's why I say you can't be putting out that kind of energy and not expect the repercussions from the universe. And man may be used, natural disaster may be used. Is that a fair assessment and or awareness of what karma is and, so to speak, does to us?
I think you put it very well, Richard. You mentioned action and reaction are opposite and equal. That's a way of putting it, I believe, is how the Lord Buddha phrased it. And of course, Jesus Christ said, "As you sow, so must you reap." Mm-hmm. Dr. King had a way of putting it, which I like. I think it's very good indeed. Which karma is a pressure, and it's a pressure of you, the mind, and you, the soul, towards you, the spirit. And this comes back, if you like, to what I was saying earlier from Hamlet. There's a divinity which shapes our ends, so few them how we will. There is this force. I dislike, I will put on record, I dislike the phrase, karma is a bitch. Okay. I think that's a completely wrong misunderstanding. Karma isn't. Karma actually is the very opposite of a bitch. It's there to teach, it's there to guide, it's there to hold all things together. as a law, as an aspect of the ultimate wholeness, we refer to as God. But I think in terms of, I think you put it very well. I do think just very briefly, just to sort of go back to the whole free will bit, because I do, while we've recognized free will, what we didn't mention was divine will. And I think the divine will, if you like, is the predestination. And I was sort of thinking about it as you were speaking there. We're all we're all threads that make up a rope. And our free will is when we become a sort of frayed aspect of that rope. We're part of the frayed end, and we're sort of, and for example, we may make a choice in that free will thing. Do I have this extra beer or not? And if we're in free will mode, sure, I'll have an extra beer. And it puts us over the limit and we're in an accident. If we tap into, if you like, the divine will or our higher consciousness that is saying, Paul, no, you've got to drive home. You don't need the beer. You've had enough. When you listen to that and I don't have the beer, I'm exercising my free will, but it's more tied into that sort of divine higher intelligence that, I go home and all is well. So I think that, anyway, that's just something to sort of throw into this conversation. But, by having the extra beer, by getting involved in the accident, that was my karma. I didn't pay attention to my higher intuitive self. And had I done so, it would have brought about a very different outcome. And I can say wrongly, karma's a bitch. No, I brought it upon myself. As you sow, so shall you reap. So listening to higher intelligence, one's intuition, is an essential navigating tool. I can't hear you.
I will say that after hearing your explanation, in spite of the fact that I have, been aware of what karma is for decades, I tend to agree with you. Matter of fact, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Karma is not malignant; it's benign in that respect. It just is. And you can't escape it, whether it's your good deeds, good thoughts, good words, good actions, or bad, if you want to put it in the dualistic concept. One of the things that I've also thought about, too, because I've struggled here with this whole concept of dualism, good and bad, good karma, bad karma, and so forth. And I don't, and based upon your explanation, if I'm correct here, you do not believe there is such a thing as good or bad karma. It just is what it is. Again.
Well, let me quote Shakespeare again.
Okay, please.
Because he said, nothing is good nor bad. Only thinking makes it so.
Aha. Well, you know that Chinese story that I think I've shared before about the farmer and his son and the neighbor who comes over every day?
Yeah, good luck, bad luck.
Yeah, good luck, bad luck. Yeah. That's kind of where I'm coming from now. I'm saying it doesn't matter what happens here on this planet any more than it matters what's happening out in the cosmos or on the subatomic microscopic level. It just is. That just is.
Well, there I would disagree with you.
Okay.
Because when you say it doesn't matter, where I would disagree is actually I think that it intensely matters.
Okay.
I think that every aspect of our life intensely matters, but maybe that's just a matter of nothing is good or bad, only thinking makes it so. But I did confess up front that I'm a Shakespeare nut.
Yes.
And there's another play, Othello, and are you familiar with the play Othello?
I am. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, you've got this so-called evil character Iago, who brings about complete destruction and the breakup of Othello's marriage to Desdemona and all the rest. And he's an utterly despicable human being, you could say. And one of the characters, I think it's probably Othello himself, but he says, "Oh, the pity of it, the pity of it." And I think that if we sort of happy-go-lucky with the state of the world, it doesn't really matter. I think it matters enormously, and matters as much as anything. And if we do allow it all to go to a hell in a handbasket, the pity of it, the pity of it. We're here to make, it's a very simple phrase. We're here to, which I'm not sure is the correct one, but to glorify God, but to make the best of everything. I think that's our calling. That's what this predestination is about. Free will, you can say, gives us the choice. It gives us the choice for a limited period of time. But ultimately, in that grand scheme of predestination, it has to be perfected. Because it's all going back to God, and it has to be perfected before it can make that natural evolutionary step. So I think everything matters.
And I wouldn't disagree with you the way you've explained it. Of course, when I say it doesn't matter, I should have been more specific in saying that it's neither good nor bad as to what is happening. Again, as you quoted Shakespeare, it's all a matter of perception.
Well, I can take that in the sense of your Chinese story with the man, the good luck, the bad luck. To in other words, oh my God, the world's falling apart, maybe, but individually do your part to ensure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, and you and I both have known people in our lives who have been stricken with certain diseases, dysfunctions, disorders, and they have suffered through those. They've either, and I have to compliment Bernie Siegel, Dr. Bernie Siegel, who's been on this program many times, for his elucidating on the death of his wife. And I was chatting with him, and I said, "Yeah, I know. Transitioning is a real interesting topic. I have talked about this many times." To which he stopped me and he says, "What do you mean? What transitioning? When you talk about my wife, she didn't transition. She died. What's wrong with saying she died?" And I loved his emphasis on that. But that's one of the things that we see people. They either die when they go through these conditions, or they come through them and they're well for a while, and then they're able to inspire others and encourage others and give them the impetus to go on, to live, if you will, to live their lives, to live their life's purpose, and so on and so on and so on, to serve others. And that is where, when I see this kind of thing happening, for example, I can share this with you, that I have an elder sister whose breast cancer has returned, and it has moved into her spine. And over the holidays, we'll be spending the holidays together, Christmas, because we don't know if this will be the last Christmas that we as a family will spend together. But at the same time, she is a very strong, I think, she's a very strong woman, married, has a child, has an adult, it's an adult child now, who has her own 2 children. So my sister is a grandmother. And she has brought into this world, through the life that my parents gave her, a new life, and then 2 new lives through that life, and how they will go on to maybe carry on her legacy, as it were, if she were to leave this world and die sooner rather than later. And so I think about that in terms of, again, that whole aspect of the story of the good and the bad. It is really, I think Shakespeare hit it right on the head about perception. It's what you think it is. Is it, my God, the sun coming up today, and it's 65 degrees. Oh, that's bad. Well, that's a matter of perception. I think that's pretty cool. But again, it's all based upon our points of reference and how we influence people and how we are influenced by other people. And I have to say that there seems to be like a gray area between free will and predestination. It's almost like there's a sort of I'm going to use the word transitioning, a transition phase, if you will, kind of like the asteroid belt around the solar system, that separates our free will from the predestination, the big picture.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's some kind of maybe electromagnetic force between the two. But I agree, in the physical sense, as we understand the physical sense, they are disconnected, but there is, there's an attraction and repellent going on between the two.
Exactly. Reverend Paul Nugent, my guest. He is with the Aetherius Society. And does the Aetherius Society have worship centers of a kind?
Yeah, we do. I mentioned, right at the beginning, we are a church.
Yes.
We're an organization, but we're a spiritual organization. We have several centers around the world. One closest to where you are, where I am right now, is here in Hollywood, California. And we have, the COVID did throw a spanner in the wrench, and it still is to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. But we have services actually indoors and outdoors. Ordinarily they always would have been indoors, at least 3 times a week. And the essence of our services is essentially coming back to sort of our purpose here, is to send out spiritual light, spiritual energy, healing, to the world as a whole, or to humanity as a whole, and actually to the earth. I mean, when I say the world as a whole, I can say to the Mother Earth. We send energy to the Mother Earth, and to the whole of humanity, to invoke this higher frequency of energy, which we're all utterly capable of doing. Through prayer is a very good way of doing it, mantra is another. And conditioning it with our own thoughts, our own love, our own feeling, and transmitting it out into the mind belt, the ethers of our world. That's the gist of what the Aetherius Society is about, in that sense.
And we're going to jump into our third subject here on Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're talking with Reverend Paul Nugent of the Aetherius Society. The third point or element in this triangle, if you will, that we are talking about here between predestination and free will, karma. And now we throw in a really interesting element here, and that is reincarnation. The philosophy, as I understand it, that we as individuals have lived previous lives, potentially on this planet or elsewhere. We just don't know. But I'm going to throw one other element that you sort of kind of in a way alluded to earlier in the program. It has been stated that there is a theory, and I think it's in physics, maybe it's quantum physics, that every time that we make a choice, our timeline diverges, goes off. And that the one timeline goes one direction where we didn't make the choice, or we made a different choice, and then the other one is that we made the choice. And every time we do that, it fractures off. I remember seeing a movie to that effect. It was really kind of a fascinating, mind-bending kind of concept. We won't go there quite yet, but other dimensions is another aspect of this as well, if we were to incorporate that in. But I guess to keep it simple, let's just stick with past lives. I've had a hypnosis experience, life between lives experience, where I experienced my life before this one, and then the death, and then the period between that death and the birth into this life. And I actually liked that life. That was really kind of neat. And it really spoke to me. It resonated with me as a farmer. I had a farm, a barn with a few animals and so forth. And it was really a very cool life, especially being connected with nature. So how does this element of our souls, our essence, if you will, shall we say, jumping from one lifetime to the next, to the next, to the next, in terms of this aspect of karma and free will versus the grand scheme of things, predestination?
Well, I think we can say that karma makes no sense without reincarnation. Because what's the point? If there is no reincarnation, then it doesn't really matter what you do. Well, I suppose, dare I say, Christians would argue against that. You either go to heaven or you go to hell. But I can't think of anybody who is worthy of either. You know.
Interesting point.
And we're all very much in that grey area.
Yeah.
You mentioned, and you also, you mentioned the soul, and coming back to that sort of electromagnetic area or whatever it is, that force field between free will and predestination. I think the soul. We can't see the soul with the physical eye. Mm-hmm. We can intuitively sense it. It's our conscience. You could say, I would say, it's got higher intelligence, and it loves us with a divinity that is absolute, and that soul is our individual soul, but itself has got that same etheric connection to spirit, which is within everything. And in terms of reincarnation, what is going through that process is the soul. So it's inhabiting, I'll use the word, naturally going to a level of frequency that when we die, when the body physically dies, the soul is released and goes to a level of frequency that to which it is most and best suited, where it will inhabit an etheric body on an etheric realm, be it a higher realm or a lower realm. And I think that those realms are very largely created by the collective thought pattern of the human race. We've created it as a thought form in the ethers that we can identify with, that and where we go and where we will continue to learn in the evolutionary sense until it is our appropriate time to be reborn into a physical body. And it's said that we actually choose the circumstances of our birth. We choose our parents because in that predestination sense, there are certain lessons we need to learn. And on a very basic way, I sometimes liken life to a game of bingo because we've all got these cards, and I've got number 4 crossed off, but I need 16 and I need 22. You don't need 22 and you don't need 16, but you do need 48. You need your set of lessons. I need my set of lessons. So we're born into a certain set of circumstances. And the way I wrap my head around that, because I understand that as a theory, but how it actually plays out, because when you said that we choose our parents, does that mean that I forced my mother and my father to get together with or without marriage, but certainly to have intercourse so that to create a fetus into which I could be born? Mm-hmm. No, because they've got their own karmic pattern and free will, etc. So I think that the way this actually plays out is that there I am on another realm. It is physical, but it's not the same physical realm that we have here, the same physical plane. And karmically, by my own higher judgment, it is time for me to be reborn. I think that, okay, so now I go into and see what vessel, what body, what set of circumstances is available to me based upon my own karmic development. And so do I, in other words, it's like a kid going into a candy shop, and one kid's got $10 to spend and one's only got 50 cents. You know, you can't, and the guy with 50 cents can't pick a life that's going to be a $10 life. It's going to be a difficult life. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a difficult life because that's the nature of what his soul is determining for him based upon his karmic experience, his karmic pattern so far, to give him another go. And the person, I mean, it isn't in that sense. I certainly don't like to sort of use that monetary phrase, but in terms of opportunity to do more. I mean, because some children are born into very loving, happy homes, and they're given all the best tools of life, none of which are a guarantee that that child will succeed, and the one who's born into very difficult circumstances will fail. It will depend upon the consciousness and determination of each individual and the choices that they make. But anyway, I think that is how reincarnation largely operates, and all towards this ultimate state, what we call ascension, where we actually will no longer need to be physically on Earth or even on another realm of Earth. We will go to a higher, you can say it's a graduation. Yeah, which literally ascension is, so that one can go on to a higher school, go on to a university of learning, if you like, upon other planets in our solar system. And it's a pretty endless journey, but it just gets more and more ecstatic as we progress, as we evolve.
It is truly fascinating from my perspective to contemplate these different aspects. I have always been intrigued by the aspect in the transition period between one life and the next. This is the way it has been phrased, and I'm curious as to the Aetherius Society's perspective on this. The aspect that we sign a contract to have these, as you referred to, have these certain experiences so that we can learn these certain lessons. But I've also heard it said that even after you have come into this life here as a mortal on this planet in particular, that there is a way that one can, even while living this life under that contract, they can, in a manner of speaking, renegotiate the terms of that contract, i.e., using your example of the $10 candy store guy and the 50-cent candy store guy, I can say, you know what, no, I don't need that. I don't really want to do that. I want to be the $10 guy, or at least the $5 guy. Okay, and so I want to change the contract, and I've heard it said that one can do that. Is that something that the Aetherius Society has a perspective on?
Well, yes and no, Richard. Because everything changes, and everything is changeable, but everything is only changeable under the karmic law. So to make your 50 cents into $5 or even $10, it has to be earned. It's not just, oh, sure, whatever, mate, Right. Yeah, take the $5. It's just karmically not allowed. Right. But the 50 cents kid, upon being born into very challenging circumstances, if he, makes some dramatic change in his own life and realizes, no, I'm not going to do that just because I'm in a gang and the gang are telling me to do that. No, I know, and if he gets in touch with his intuitive consciousness and intuition that tells him, that knows that action is wrong, and says, no, I want to try hard at school, I want to get on in life, I want to make my life into being something of value and meaning. Absolutely, that kid can do that, and will be given all the help of creation. This is how a karma comes in to help. And then he will turn, it is literally, you can say, Jesus' parable of the talents, and make it into something far more. So, no, I don't think you can just reject the 50 cents. Oh, I don't want that, I want the $5. Mm-hmm. No, we create it. Right. We create it. And yes, everything is changeable in that sense.
And it goes to that one phrase I've heard time and time again: we create our own reality. And our reality here is, of course, that we are talking with Reverend Paul Nugent. He is with the Aetherius Society, the Aetherius Church, here in California in particular. They're in Hollywood. We will be linked to the website of the Aetherius Society so that you folks can find out more about the work that they are doing and maybe get involved in whatever capacity. Learn more about Yogi King and the work that he has brought, and so forth. And we are most appreciative of the work that he has done that has basically elucidated and enlightened us in this particular program. And Paul, we are greatly appreciative of your participation here in Tell Me Your Story.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. And I couldn't tell it to you without you asking me to be on your show and having this wonderful conversation.
And this is Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are going to ask you, Reverend Paul Nugent, those three final questions. I've asked you twice before, and actually the first two times, the answers were different both times.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you again, but
That's called living in the moment, Richard.
There you go. Let's live in the moment. And I'm going to let our listeners know, and our viewers, that this program is here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., 9 a.m. on Wednesday mornings for the special edition of Tell Me Your Story. We are also on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And we are also on YouTube where you can watch these videos. The channel is Tell Me Your Story, Richard Dugan. Just make sure you look for the guy with the black hat. Sort of black, brown, whatever color that is, with the hat. Just look for the guy with the hat. And hope that you will do that. And also, if you can support the work that we are doing here financially, we'd greatly appreciate that. We do have a PayPal account. It's for your security as well as ours. And we ask that you go to PayPal and send us whatever you can afford. We'll take energetic support too, but when you're there at PayPal and you hit the send, it's going to ask you for an email address to send it to, and it would be Richard@richarddugan.com. That's Richard@richarddugan.com. And we are grateful, ever so grateful, for all of the support we have received and will receive from those who are listening and watching Tell Me Your Story. We also ask you to participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, the 2020s, as we ask you to go within to that quiet, still, calm, peaceful place and listen to that still, small voice of guidance and inspiration. And we hope that you will spend time doing that. Even if you just spend a minute or two doing it, it'll be well worth the time that you do spend. And with that, we're going to now ask our final three questions we ask every program. And the first of those three is, who is Reverend Paul Nugent?
An evolving soul.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
Greater enlightenment for all.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
Be at peace when I die.
Couldn't agree with you more. My death on my last life was putting my feet up on the rail, kicking my hat back and going, been a good life. And I died. It was that simple. And this was very informative, enlightening, and very simple. It only took us an hour, but it was a lot of fun, and I thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Richard. My absolute pleasure.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we give you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal.